Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. WWJD. Do you remember that? Does anyone remember that term from the 1990s? WWJD. What would Jesus do? That was a movement and term from the 1990s. It was a movement actually established and targeted toward teenagers and young adults. That was certainly a good age group to target that too, as they were the age of making decisions for themselves for the very first time. So it was a great movement for the kids, but actually everyone jumped on that bandwagon. Before we knew it, we had everyone buying t-shirts, hats, bracelets, and of course the Bible covers that everyone saw every week in church. WWJD. It was really a big movement, and I'm sure you all remember that. I certainly want to talk to you about a Reverend Charles Sheldon from Topeka, Kansas, and what he was responsible for. He was responsible for pleasing God. He lived his life that he believed that everyone should do that, live their life to please God, and asking himself, what would Jesus do? And I actually was introduced to Reverend Sheldon as I was doing research for another class. And I came across his information on the ChristianBook.com website. And from there, I learned that he was from New York. He was born in 1857, and he was a PK, like some of you in this room. He graduated from Brown University and then Andover Theological Seminary. He also was ordained in 1889 and accepted a position in Topeka, Kansas, and moved there. Reverend Sheldon put his convictions into action. Today I'm going to share with you his philosophy, how he put that philosophy into action, as well as how it has impacted us today. On encyclopedia.com, it listed what his philosophy was. It said that he believed putting one's religion into practice every day was important. So he did that. He was very involved with an organization known as the Social Gospel Movement. And that group believed that salvation and good works were tied together, that everyone should live their life as if how Jesus would, and to honor God. Each person had to put their own desires behind and serve others. And I think a lot of us try to do that today as well. Reverend Sheldon expressed his philosophy by putting his beliefs into action, by serving others. Well before we heard of a civil rights movement, he was very instrumental in doing that in his area. Where he lived happened to be close to Tennessee town, where it was a settlement of former slaves that came from Tennessee and Mississippi. He noticed that they were there and certainly tried to do something for them. Believing that education was going to help anyone come along, he actually started with his group, Sheldon Kindergarten. That was the very first kindergarten for any African Americans west of Mississippi. In addition to that, he was very concerned with just the economic and social environment of the community. People could not get jobs. He himself went out, put on dirty clothes, tried to find a job. He was turned down, and with that experience, he learned what to teach the men in his community. He was very much trying to help everyone in civil rights. Because of his convictions of doing what Jesus would have done, Reverend Sheldon is still reaching people today. He was an advocate as well as a storyteller, and remember, he was a pastor. So as he went along, he noticed that his pews, as popular as he was in his community, were not as full on his Sunday evening services as they were on Sunday mornings. As a storyteller, he began to tell stories on Sunday evening services, but he would never tell what the end was. What was the climax? It was a hook. You had to come back the next week to hear what the end of the story was. And just from sharing his faith, telling stories, he was able to reach the community with what he was trying to teach. And it made an impact. As being a storyteller, his stories also became very popular, and it turned into books. One of his most popular books is In His Steps. How many of you are familiar with this book? And in this book are just stories that he told in his congregation. And this is also where you will find the words of what would Jesus do, written here in this book. In conclusion, Reverend Shelton's faith was the driving force on how he lived his life, a life that reached out to help others, and a life that made an impact on his society and our society today. He wrote that book, and it was published in 1896, and still today, we had something that said, what would Jesus do? Thank you.